Hello
bringing
again. We're two ancient broads, semi-enlightened.
up, bringing you the present, the past, and the future all in one. This is
That's
going to be an interesting episode, I feel. Our last one was on mothers, and I learned a lot
I learned a
just
lot.
doing that and hearing from you, Dot, and how we learn to take the best and how we learn to look at the big picture of what goes on in these relationships.
Right. And really looking for the value.
Yes.
Yeah. Even though in the beginning or at the moment in our lives as children, it didn't look so valuable, but I love the aspect of retrospect,
Yeah,
because that's, I think, where we understand what we learned.
that's lovely.
And that's true whether it's our mothers or our fathers or, you know, the shoe shine boy on the corner.
Well, let's remember that we're in our later years, and the most freeing thing I ever heard and ever learned was that I had set the whole thing up. And that took everybody off the lines of, look what you did to me, and how could you, and you ruined me, and all that. And there were years of that because I had a really crazy dad. And he was a lot of things. And we were talking about why we originally wanted to talk about mother and dads was that we get so much good stuff. And sometimes we forget it when there's trauma involved.
That's true.
And when you begin to remember, oh, but this did happen. And he's not just this crazy, macabre being. He had some lovely moments too. And he tried here and there. And you begin to remember some of the good stuff, which is so immensely healing.
Absolutely.
And so that's what we're going to talk about today, and how we got to that space. Right, Dottie dear?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about doo-doo dada. Dada.
Let's talk about dada.
Let's think of ourselves at age 2. Daddy. What do you get in return?
I was very loved as a child and very, very spoiled.
Oh, really?
Yes, because when I was very young, two-ish, maybe younger, I'm not sure. But if I didn't get my own way, I would jump up and down in one spot and screech at the top of my lungs.
Wow.
Yes. Frankly, I don't remember doing that, but the stories that I've heard about myself, yes, and my father thought it was the funniest thing when I would do that. Until I was around 7, and we were going somewhere, and the car was packed. We were all getting in the car, and I'd forgotten my doll.
Uh-oh.
And the house is locked and everything, and I want my doll, and I'm told that it's too bad we're not taking the doll. And I jumped up and down and screeched.
Wow.
This was a time when my father didn't think it was funny, picked me up, smacked me on the butt, and put me in the back seat of the car. And that was the last time I jumped up and down and screeched. Now and then, deep inside me, I jump up and down and screech.
I've sort of seen that pass over you. Especially at the DMV, I saw you kind of awash in that kind of remember, like you'd like to go, ah!
Yeah. Yes. That was one of those times when I was jumping up and down and screeching.
Yes, get me out of here. So was your dad, you say you had a very loving child, your dad was very loving with you?
He was very much so when I was little, and he was always a man who he wasn't someone who would just reach out and hit you or something like that. But my father's, one of my father's shortcomings, I'll say, was his drinking. And not that he was a hardcore alcoholic, but he would drink beer mostly. And when that was the case, he would do things that, to me, even as I was growing up, were appalling. And
Like,
did he mean to be mean?
you mean verbally?
Pardon me?
Verbally, you mean?
No, not so much. It was just things that he would do. And I remember a time when we were all driving somewhere, and he and my uncle were in the front seat of the car, and my aunt and my mother and I were in the back seat. And there was a dog running along the side of the road, and he just swerved over and hit it, and kept on going. And because he was drinking. And to me, I started to say something, and we talked about this when we were talking about moms. My mom said, "Don't say anything," because she was afraid that it would aggravate him. But it's something I never forgot that he did. And oftentimes when I think of my father, I think of the things I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't let him out of the prison that I hold him in.
What can you tell me about your dad that was empowering, that was loving for you, or that he did for the family? Or
he was someone that the rest of the family could depend on. He was someone who could fix anything.
Oh.
When I was 2 or 3, he by himself built our house.
What?
From the foundation up.
Wow, by himself.
Yes.
Dude.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I don't remember everything. I don't know if he had someone come in and do the electricity. He probably did.
That's the most awesome thing I've heard of a father doing on his own.
Mm-hmm. And we lived in a tent on the property. We had 4 acres of land, and we lived in a tent while he built that.
Wow.
And I mean, that's a pretty awesome thing for someone to be able to do, who actually was certainly not a professional carpenter or anything else. He got a book and saw how to do it and did it.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And he had a lot of
So what did you take from that?
I think that one thing that I got from him was that it never occurs to me that I can't do something. Truly.
That's what I know about you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It doesn't occur to me that I can't do something until I start it. And then halfway through it, I think something's going to take me an hour to do. And then, 4 hours later, I know I'm not able to do this. And so then I call for help, or I call someone who knows how to do it.
Yeah, you really have a confidence and an
that's
intent.
A little over the top sometimes.
Yeah, but that's okay. It's better than not trying, I think.
Well, I mean,
unless you know that you're not going to be able to do it. You're very good when you set an intention about something.
Well, sometimes I am, yes, but I don't have any fear about trying something new. I don't.
And so that's a great gift. That may have taken you to California too.
Exactly. Yeah. And so those are some of the things that he certainly showed, and I learned a great deal without knowing I was learning. I learned a great deal by observing that.
So did your dad change when your mother died?
Oh my God. That was, he started drinking heavily after that. And he had always, all of my life, always had alcohol and usually, I will say, usually beer. If he drank hard alcohol, he was really mean.
Mm.
Yeah. But
This
but he didn't do that. He did not do that very often. Sometimes I'm a little reticent about doing certain things. I'll say that, but
yeah.
I don't think I have a lot of fear. I don't want to jump out of a plane without a parachute, or something like that. But I mean, everyday things. I don't have a lot of fear in trying something.
Was your father tender?
Sometimes he had a horrible childhood,
I'll bet.
and but he was self-protective, and so he wouldn't show a lot of his vulnerability.
Imagine if he knew in that time period that he had created all of it, that his parents hadn't done that to him out of just cruelty or whatever, that they had done it because that was their assignment,
Hmm.
out of his own volition, out of his own intention.
And I don't know, but I'm not sure that he would have had the consciousness at that time to
Probably
understand that.
just even hear that.
Yeah.
Imagine if you had said that to him.
Mm. I'm going to say I would doubt that would have resonated with him. And I
Probably,
could be wrong, certainly.
well, probably not if he had that many walls, etc.
Yeah,
Probably he
he had lots of walls, believe me.
want to hear that.
Yeah.
But
But there were times when his behavior was very unacceptable.
mhm.
And I
How
mean,
did you feel about that?
well, it had a great effect on me. I mean, there was a time when something that he did affected me to such a degree. It's an interesting thing. There was a time when he was drinking that he came home and he'd been laid off from work. He was feeling very impotent in life, and he told us all he was going to kill us. And I was about 12 years old when that happened.
Wow.
And it was about 6 months after that I had to get glasses.
Interesting.
It affected me at such a deep level. It was something at that time that I didn't want to see,
That's right.
and it affected my eyesight, because my eyesight went like this. All of
Wow.
a sudden, I have to sit in the front of the room because I can't read the board from the back of the room. And I was usually in the back of the room because my last name was a T. And in those days, they put everybody in alphabetical order.
Right. Wow, that's incredible.
Right.
Wow.
Mm. And my relationship with him at that time changed dramatically. Until then, we were very close. After that, I had trouble being around him.
Well, how can you trust that?
Well, that's right, because here was the person that I trusted implicitly, who all of a sudden was threatening my life. So when those things happen to you when you're 2 or 3 or 4, it goes in even deeper. And but at 12, your brain is a little bit different. And
What did your mother say to you about that? About what happened?
we never talked about it.
Wow, Don.
We never talked about it after that. But she, in that moment, told me to go into the kitchen with my brother, and she sat there and talked to him, and finally got him to go to bed.
And where were you?
At that time, I'd been in the living room with them, and he threatening us. My mother sent my brother and I into the kitchen, and she sat there and talked to him calmly until he went in and went to bed. And it was never discussed after that. But he was a man who, for the most part, had alcohol in his system all the time. Not fall down drunk. I don't mean that, but
I know.
and so all of that had an effect on me. I can today I can have some takeaways of some of his characteristics that served me, didn't take away from me. But I remember at a certain point, not knowing in my heart, I wasn't going to get married until I was 30. At 18, I made that decision because I didn't want to waste my life on one man. Those were my words.
Wow.
And yeah. And the other part was that I looked at my mother's life and I didn't want that life. I didn't want, what if I married somebody like my father? And that was my big concern. What if that I got to I would be in a marriage and suddenly realize that this man had some issues and I didn't want to be in that marriage. From that point, I didn't want to have my mother's life.
And what's interesting to me is oftentimes women or men that have one abusive parent that's the opposite sex go on to choose it again and again in their partners. Right. And you go that route.
Well, I think someplace deep inside me, I knew better. I mean, someplace at a certain age, I was probably more in my mid-teens when I realized that I watched their relationship and I said to myself, I don't want to live that. So it's my relationship with my father was sometimes contentious, sometimes difficult, other times loving, but I at a certain point recognized that I had emotionally, I'm going to say, or consciously, I had kept him in a prison for a long time because I was only focused on what he did wrong. I mean, he was a man who loved his grandchildren. Oh my God. He loved his grandchildren. And so there were a lot, he had some wonderful qualities. And I recognized that I wasn't always focused on those wonderful qualities.
You know, he gave you some very sweet memories too.
Yes, he did.
And just to hold on to those. And again, that I have compassion for the path you chose, Dad.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, nothing occurred, I think, nothing occurred that that didn't have my signature on it.
Right.
I signed up for it someplace.
It's in your record.
Right.
It's your blueprint.
Tell us about your relationship.
Well, I'm just going to take a deep breath because that was very emotional. So I'm just going to take a deep breath for a minute. Well, what would you like to know?
Something about your father that that you recognized as a child, but I mean, observed, I'll say, not necessarily recognized, but observed that had a positive effect on you.
Well, when I was very little, before my father went off to war and was totally changed after that, I was the apple of his eye. So we had a great relationship when I was like 1 and 2 years old. And then he went off to war and he was blown up in Korea, and he had a doctor that worked on him, and the doctor had a daughter, and he fell in love with the daughter, and he had a secret life.
Ah.
He really did not want to come back to
Mm.
America.
Mm.
I think he found the father he never had, and he found the woman he probably would have stayed with for the rest of his life. But he came back, and he was totally different. And he had terrible PTSD.
Mm.
Years later, I can see that now, that's what was going on. I mean, he would pick up the food off the table and throw it against the wall without announcing it. He would, I mean, it went on and on. And he was, he was an incester.
Mm.
So he was a predator. He was a child predator on top of it. He was so confused and so
You,
sick.
I'm curious, knowing the person you are today, when you look back on that and intuitively, do you think he would have been the predator if the things that happened, if some of the things that had happened to him had not happened?
I don't know.
No.
I don't know, because my aunt, his sister, had said that his father, my father's father, had molested her.
Ah.
So I tend to think it was carried through, because both my father and my grandfather had one of their legs amputated, and they both smoked cigars, and they both were gamblers. And my father really followed his father's suit. My grandfather was one of the most charming people you'd ever want to meet, but he was a big time gambler, and he had lots of affairs, and he was Jewish, and nobody would own up to that at all. Our family was not allowed to talk about it. I didn't even know it till I was 17, and somebody clued me in and said, "Your grandfather is the biggest nose I've ever seen. Wake up, girl. You're Jewish." And I said, "Oh, okay." I was delighted because all my friends were Jewish or black, and I thought, it's interesting that I go to that. And I told my dad, "Dad, I know now. We're Jewish." And he said, "Don't ever say that again, because we'll lose all of our notoriety in New York." My father was very famous and very charismatic and very successful after he got old in his 40s and 50s. And we had a lot of money, and he was a mess.
Yeah.
And he would come home at night, and I would shut myself off in another area. I would turn on Barbra Streisand really loud, and I would have nothing to do with him at all. And nobody helped me with it.
Mm.
So I had tremendous rage and fear inside of me. And but I had great friends, and I had New York City to dive into. Instead of going to school, I was in this very posh New York girls' school. I never went. I flunked out of there. I was at the movies all day long. I was watching Tom Jones and all these great films, and I wanted to be an actress or a singer, blah, blah, blah. And I was a poet, and that's what saved my life, really. And so for a long time, when my dad would call, I moved to California, and when my dad would call me on the phone to say happy birthday or whatever, and he did some nice things when I was younger too. I mean, he brought us home skis to go skiing in Syracuse, and he took us to Europe. But there were always episodes that went along with it that were really psychotic. So you never knew what you were going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And but I remember lots of good things now they did, and he did try to heal some of it, but none of the women in the house, my sisters and my mother, we weren't into him. We were so done with his abuse. So he was really, talk about imprisoned. We put that dude in San Quentin. He was, we would have nothing to do with him. And but he would still do these tyrannical, crazy things. And so anyway, so I moved away, and he would call me on the phone often and say, for my birthday or whatever. And I would stay on the phone with him for about 3 minutes. That's what I can handle, because I hadn't done the work.
Right.
And I know what I know now. And then when I was 40, the man that I was with at the time said, "Simone, you can have a much bigger life if you go and talk to your father and tell him that you remember everything now and get clear with him." So he took me on a plane, and we went to New York, and we went to the Plaza Hotel, and to stay one night, because that's all we could afford. And I knew my dad would like that. And it was his 60th birthday. And, excuse me, 70th birthday, not 60th. And he came to the hotel, and my boyfriend at the time sat in the hallway. I'll never forget this, because you never knew what you were going to get with my dad. You just never knew. So I sat down, and I just started saying to him, "Dad, I remember everything. I remember everything that happened when I was 3 and 4 and 5. And you want to know why you've never had a relationship with me? This is why. Do you remember any of this? Well, he just started crying, just crying and crying and crying and crying and crying. He said, I don't remember this, but I knew something went very bad. And I said, yeah. And I need to get over it because my life isn't going the way that I would like it to go. And I thank you for New York and stuff that was going on, but you know, this was very bad, Dad. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. He was unbelievable. He sat there and he said, I don't know how to thank you for telling me this. It's the best birthday gift of my life. So my father had a way of being big too. He was racist in many ways. He was a social climber. He loved the attention and popularity he had. He loved going around in a chauffeur-driven, it was so ridiculous. But anyway, and we used to have a joke. We'd say, here we live next door to Lucille Ball, but if you look at the bottom of my father's shoe, there's a hole in it. Because, you know, he would be gambling and the mob would show up late at night at our house. I mean, he just never, it's really film, it's a film. Now as I look back and I wish, and the child's part of me wishes that I had known what I know now so that I could have forgiven him fully while he was alive. I think that would have helped him as a soul. And I have thanked him many times since he passed, you know, and told him, you know, that I remember a lot of really good stuff and that I've used what he's given me as far as, especially my years in New York. Oh my God. It helps me so much to know that I knew him before. I've looked at past lives with him before and how intricate our relationship was. And when you get to be really big and you see that you could have had all kinds of relationships with the people that came in as your father this time and not get freaked out about what else has gone on, right. You can learn a lot about yourself and you can learn a lot and you breathe differently. There's more vastness to it. And that's why I love past life regression so much.
Yeah.
You know.
But tell me if looking back at your dad and all of the different facets of his personality, what's one thing that you could say that you admire?
Oh, there were so many things. He was a fantastic cook.
Mm.
He would live a very large life, and he would bring in the top chefs of New York to cook lunch for his top salespeople. But he did stuff like that. I remember one year he said, you know, we all have to learn how to be gourmets. And I'm thinking, what's that? And why do I need that? I think I was 12 or something. So he had us live over the most posh French restaurant, Le Pavillon in New York. I didn't know what I was eating. He would say, oh, souffle potatoes. And it was just ridiculousness times 1,000. But he loved it, and he thought he was educating us. In his heart of hearts, he was giving us the best life
exactly
he possibly could. Mm-hmm. Actually, he was giving himself the best life. He was a narcissist. He was a classic narcissist. He was giving himself the life that he would have liked to have had as a child.
But it also had an effect on you.
Oh, it did. Mm-hmm. I mean, and in lots of really great ways. I mean, I had to fight to keep my independence because I was very much for the Black Panthers in New York. I was very much for the women's movement in New York, things that he did not want me to be a part of. And when he found out that I was psychic and I was doing readings in New York, I remember he threw a party for me and my sister when we went back to New York, 30 years ago. And he would introduce me as, this is my daughter. I don't know what she does. Because he was so unnerved by it. He didn't know what the heck, but his sister was one of the first Reiki masters in the United States. My whole family's got all this metaphysical stuff going
Isn't that interesting?
What I liked about my dad was that he went for it in life. He was a salesman through and through. The dude could sell you anything. And he was utterly charming, the way someone like Ole Cassini or one of these really charming men. His father was like that too. And so I liked that charm And I liked his ability to talk to anybody. And he wanted me to get a good education. He wanted me to speak French and, do the things that I was privy to do. But he also pushed me to social climb and to have very important friends. And it was so delusional. And luckily, I was rebellious enough and angry enough at him that I turned against those things, or I would have been a very different person.
Mm-hmm.
So he actually gave me my chutzpah.
Mm-hmm. That's very true.
I'm a fighter for the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that was out of rebellion. It was real, and I wanted to fight for the underdog, but it was also to show him something. And mostly all of my boyfriends have been of other nationalities,
Mm-hmm.
and that would drive him nuts, just nuts. Why can't you just have an ordinary white dude? Blah, 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 blah. And I feel like if I hadn't gone through what I had with him, I might have bought into it, and I might have become one of those social climbing elitist jerks.
Mm.
Would have been very easy.
Yeah, but the exposure to all of that has allowed you to be very comfortable.
Yeah.
With anyone.
He gave me that.
Yeah.
He said, "You're a Copeland. The world is your oyster, kiddo. I'm going to open this up for you." He did.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I'm very grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. I don't get scared around famous or wealthy, or I just see them. I think we're all equal.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, and I learned how to talk to people like that at such an early age, because my parents would throw these very highfalutin parties in New York. And like I wrote about in The Goddess, Richard Nixon came once. I mean, we'd have these crazy things going on. And I was so depressed and had so little self-esteem after what had happened to me, that I would just kind of be going, I just want to go to my room. I just want to get away. But I would watch how he moved. Couldn't watch my mother because she was depressed, but my dad could move in any circle and charm anybody. And that was rather fascinating. He was a Cancer. And he had a big heart. He really did. But he was so much PTSD.
A lot of drama there.
Terrible. He got the Purple Heart, he was on the cover of Life magazine. He was blown up. The skin was, he went back to get, quote, his men that were, he knew that something was going to go off in Korea, and he ran in, got everybody out, but he was blown up.
That one thing says a lot about him.
That's what I mean. There was so much that I couldn't know about him because what had happened. But he was on, here he goes, it said Dying Yank, and here he is all bandaged up with a big cigar hanging out of his mouth, just like his own father. Yeah, so, I thank my dad for the depth and the healing that had to take place in order to overcome what I did have to overcome. Mm-hmm. And also, I thank Alice Bailey and all the great psychics and intuitives and interpreters and channels that helped us know about these blueprints, and that helped me, gave me permission to do the work that I do.
Right.
Because I can go to places with people. It's pretty great. Mm-hmm. I had to go there. Mm-hmm. So I work with a lot of women that have been molested. I work with a lot of women who had abusive fathers. Yeah. And it's my honor to do that. And I would not have been able to do that without my father.
That's true. Yeah. Everybody plays their part in our play, don't they?
Come on in,
And we wrote the script.
And what I'm so waiting for is when we get to the place where we're just love, and we stop wanting to come back in because we think we've done something wrong, or we need to go through more abuse or suffering, or we abused power, or whatever it is. In this life, for me, I want out of shame and blame for myself or anybody else. I want out. I just want to be love. That's all I want to be. So as you're listening to our stories, Dorothy's and my background histories in this life, my wish for you would be that you take some time and write a bit about your mother and your father and what you learned and what you learned today from listening to our stories, and how you can move that energy out of grief and sadness and anxiety and depression and rage. You can move out of there anytime you want, but it's a practice.
And I will say that I know that some of you had great relationships with both your parents and have no regrets and no harboring no ill will or animosity toward either of them. And this particular video may not resonate with you, but there are so many people with whom I know this will resonate. And sometimes it's just time to look at it, see it for what it is, and find the value in everything that has happened, because
Yeah,
it's made you who you are.
absolutely. And also, whether it's these things have happened to you or you had a perfect childhood or whatever, people around you this has happened to. This is an epidemic. This goes on in our country all the time. So now you have compassion and you can share what you learned here today, some of it if it resonates for you, and you can be a better friend. You can be a better mentor. You can be a better healer. You can be a better daughter. There are lots of ways you can use this way of seeing, which is having compassion for the paths we've all chosen.
Getting to the person that you really are and have always been, and letting that blossom,
Yes.
letting that strength of character, that that loving person that you truly are,
Yes.
just let that shine.
So wonderful.
It is.
No obstacles.
As the sun sets in the
Yes.
west,
Yes.
we'll bid adieu. And just so that you know, neither Simone nor I are in any way saying that we have found the way and that we have come out of this as the perfect person. No, we're still working on our stuff too.
Well,
But
we found our way.
yeah, this is just a way that hopefully you can begin to look at things a little bit differently, and know that whatever has occurred in your life, you're not alone.
Lots of love.
All right.
Take good care of yourself.
I will. Oh, you mean them.
Oh, you too.
You too.
Oh, thank you. Well, bye.